This episode is brought to you by Wear Buff, your go-to for Buffalo-inspired apparel. Get your hands on stylish t-shirts, hoodies, and more at wearbuff.com. That's wearbuff.com. And make sure you use the promo code TWB at checkout for 10% off your first order. Stay Buffalo proud with Wear Buff. The Buffalo Bills start the season with a win, taking down the Arizona Cardinals with a score of 34-28 this week on the Wandering Buffalo podcast.
You're now listening to the Wandering Buffalo podcast with your host, Justin Goddard.
Bills Mafia, welcome into another episode of the Wandering Buffalo podcast, a show on the Buffalo FamBase podcast network. My name is Justin. I will be your host today, and the Bills are off. Start the season 1-0 against the Cardinals. Some highs in this game, some lows, some weirdness, but most important thing, when we're looking back in January, I'm not really going to remember all the details of this game. I will remember that we have a 1 in the win column for this one. But before we dive into the game, just a couple housekeeping notes. Want to thank all of the fans of the show, everybody that's subscribed. We did hit a pretty big milestone for us. We hit 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, and just want to say how much that means to me, that you're all out there listening, supporting the show. Just want to thank you, say I appreciate it. Shout out to my wife, Leanne, all the support that she's given me as I kind of journeyed through doing the show, putting it on weekly, the times that we weren't having much success and I wanted to hang it up, and getting me to keep going through the craziness of our lives. And also, amongst all the other people that I could thank for where we're at right now, special shout out to our producer, Jake. I can't really understate this or overstate this. I don't know. This show would not be possible without Jake. I get on the microphone and I talk about the Bills, which is something I love doing anyways. I am absolutely terrible with technology. I would never figure out how to record this content and get it out to you. Jake does amazing things with our social medias, with the website, with the production of this podcast. So shout out to Jake. Couldn't do it without you, buddy. Let's get into the game. And there's a lot of things that I struggle with in this game, but ultimately where I land, sleeping on it, whatnot, I think this was almost the perfect game to start the season with. Most importantly, you come away with the win. But there's a lot of things that saw in this game that are kind of promising going forward. And this was the type of win where the Bills let it be much closer than it really should have been, and make you stressed out the whole game when it seemingly could have been easier. And I'm looking at plays like, the Josh Allen fumble, in the red zone, looking to get points on the board, and you turn the ball over. Looking at the Osiris Torrance face masking penalty that wipes a touchdown off the board. The kickoff return for a touchdown. The Tyler Bass kick out of bounds, with the game in the balance, giving the Cardinals the ball on the 40-yard line. There was a lot of learning moments, a lot of coaching moments, and those are always more fun when they come with the caveat of a win. So I think there was a lot of room to clean things up, and this game could have been kind of cruise control. I mean, honestly, for as bad as the first half was, the Bills, come out in the second half flying all over the place, and pretty quickly, the defense kind of locks in. Offense is getting on the same page, and they kind of took control of the game in the second half. So a lot of things to clean up and a lot of things that were good in this game, honestly. And on the offensive side of the ball, so many new pieces. We're talking all offseason about what it's going to look like without Diggs. Was that a silly move to get rid of Diggs? We hear all this commentary about everybody's going to eat, but what does that look like? And I think we saw it on full display. And you kind of figure Kincaid is going to be, the catalyst of this passing game still. Everybody's going to eat, but they're still going to be, a favorite target. It's like parents saying they don't have a favorite kid type deal. Josh Allen's still going to have his preferred targets, and I kind of figured that would be Kincaid. And in a game where Arizona seemingly wanted to take Kincaid away, he ends up with 2 targets, 1 reception for 11 yards. But it wasn't, a defensive strategy where you can take away one guy and the offense will stop moving. We truly did see everybody eat. Keon Coleman, 4 catches on 5 targets, 51 yards. Khalil Shakir, 3 for 3, 42 yards and a touchdown. James Cook involved with the passing game, 3 catches for 32 yards. Matt Collins, 2 catches, 25 yards and a touchdown. Valdez-Scantling with a big 19-yard grab. Curtis Samuel, 2 for 15. Ray Davis, 1 for 14. And the ball is just all over the place. As a defense, it just makes it so much harder to, key in on what you want to stop. Oh, and don't forget Josh Allen running the ball. 9 carries for 39 yards and 2 touchdowns. One of them jumping over Budda Baker, who is a very good safety, which makes that play all the more impressive. James Cook on the ground, 19 carries for 71 yards. I made a prediction in the offseason that Ray Davis would overtake James Cook for kind of that running back 1 role. Don't look like it after week 1. I stand by that prediction, but James Cook looked good week 1. He was blasting through holes. He was making people miss, in real tight spaces. For a while there, he was averaging something like 9 yards a carry. Obviously came back down to earth as the game, wore on here, but a good day from James Cook. And kind of didn't see a ton from Ty Johnson or Ray Davis in this game. A total of five carries between them for 20 yards. So I feel like we were able to kind of learn a lot about this offense in this game and what it would look like. And I think it becomes kind of all the more impressive that the Bills were able to kind of get through this adversity in the first game of going down at one point 17-3, and you have a quarterback with a whole new set of receivers, not very much continuity, and very quickly in the first game of the season, it becomes, back to the wall. We got to go start making plays. I will kind of include in here, yes, it's week 1. Weird things happen all over the NFL. I don't think the Cardinals are going to be some, powerhouse in the NFC. But you got to beat who's in front of you. And, in a week 1, like I said, it can be really weird. We see the Patriots, who I don't think anybody's really expecting much from this year. Jacoby Brissett is their starter. A couple of rookies waiting in the wings. Just a team that hasn't been very good in recent history and hasn't really shown much to change that. Taking down the Cincinnati Bengals, who I think most people would have at least making a playoff run, if not a deep one. So all things considered, if the weird stuff is going to happen in week 1, I'm glad to just be able to walk away with a 1 in the win column and not have the weird stuff happen and start the season with a loss. ultimately it's a long season. You can bounce back from that. You could win, 10, 15 games straight. But when us as fans wait all off season to see what this is going to look like, measure our expectations and all that, it's really hard to have to stomach a loss the first week of the season. Offensively, Shakir, absolute dog. He's going to quickly become one of my favorite players on this team. It's such a blended skill set for him. And I heard somebody say this a while back, and I can't remember who it was, but they comped him to Steve Smith. And seeing that one catch and run where he absorbs the impact and just keeps going down the field, I think that's a pretty good comparison. He's not going down. He's fighting for yards. He's getting open. He catches every target thrown his way. I think a lot of people, nationally kind of look at the Bills receiving core and hear us talking about expecting big things from Shakir. And, he's not a household name yet. And we saw what he looked like last year down the stretch. And, we know why we got excited for it. I think he's going to start putting the rest of the league on notice. And then the other standout, it has to be Josh Allen here. This was just classic Josh Allen game, putting the TO on his back, offense running through him. He did get a little bit more help in the run game, but I believe he had 5 pass attempts in the first half, just the way it went with the fumble that he lost, the points being taken off the board. Just the first half was, time of possession was just dominated by the Cardinals. And then we see him come back. He accounts for 4 touchdowns, 2 of them rushing. What's kind of lost just looking at the stat boxes, some of the second and third and longs they end up in due to penalties, which that's a whole nother thing. Year over year with McDermott being this super disciplined, no-nonsense coach, and we continue to get flagged all over the place. And I get it, the refs are flag happy, but a lot of the stuff that was being called in this game was procedural stuff. Something to clean up, as, again, a lot more fun cleaning that up with a win under the belt. But Josh Allen, hell of a game for the most overrated player in the league. I mean, 5 incompletions on the day, 232 yards, like I said, 4 touchdowns. And what I think is all the more impressive about that is kind of what I've already talked about. You're doing this with guys that you've never really played live game reps with. There wasn't a ton of action in the preseason. There wasn't, players carrying over from last year. It's really just Shakir. And to kind of have their backs to the wall and be able to make these plays, and talked about the long one to Valdez-Scantling. How about the long pass to Keon Coleman, of Allen just having faith in his rookie receiver and giving him that 50-50 ball and him coming down with it, converting a huge third down there to keep the drive alive. Not a crazy eye-popping stat day for Keon Coleman, but he led the team in targets and receptions and yards. And this is a player that I thought maybe would be kind of brought along a little bit slower, and wasn't necessarily expecting, an absolutely monster rookie season from him. And again, it's one game, but encouraging that, when all the dust settles, that he's able to lead the team in all those categories. The defensive side of the ball, I will say it kind of looks worse than it was, while it also still had some bad to it. The Cardinals putting up 28 points. But I think there's a lot of that to do with how out of hand the first half got, and that was with, like I said, 2 possessions where points should have gone on the board for the Bills. That kind of changes the way the game needs to be played. And instead of getting those points, the ball goes back to Arizona. They're a team that wants to, be able to control the clock, run the ball with their running backs, Kyler Murray, take the easy stuff for Kyler Murray, and whatever game plan they came in with that they wanted to execute, you gave them every opportunity to do that by just not really doing anything on offense in the first half. And it does sound weird to say because the Bills were moving the ball and kind of shot themselves in the foot. But as the Bills started scoring points and kind of flipping the script, we saw the defense kind of balance out a little bit. And I thought that was encouraging because, again, this is a unit that has a ton of new players in the lineup. We saw Taron Johnson go down early. Still kind of waiting for more news on that, but we've already lost Matt Milano for the season. Taron Johnson, arguably the second most valuable player on our defense, he's out for the whole game. You got a mix of Cam Lewis and Jamarcus Ingram coming in. Just not very ideal for the first game of the season, but they're able to do enough to get it done. I thought that the defensive line was encouraging, and I think it's sometimes hard to see that in a game like this where Murray was able to, kind of get his scrambles. He was able to extend plays and get the ball down the field. But it's also kind of that type of special quarterback. Think about being a defense and having to game plan for Josh Allen. And I'm not saying they're by any means similar players or skill sets, but he does have a skill set that presents problems. And, you want to get after him with your front four and make him make quick decisions and get the ball out of his hands. Well, you start getting too aggressive up the field and he's finding the run lanes. You try to switch it up to just contain him. Well, now he's, making some magic in the pocket. He's extending plays, and it's hard to cover NFL receivers for 3-4+ seconds. So I think he was an interesting quarterback matchup for week 1 to kind of get a look at things with the defense. But a couple shout outs, all reliable. Saw some nice plays from Daquan Jones. In particular, he had a batted pass, stopped them from converting for a first down. Von Miller with some pop. He ends up with a sack in this game. And the most encouraging thing for me there is he won't ever look like, 5-10 years ago, Pro Bowl, Super Bowl MVP Von Miller. And I think that's fine for this team. I think the biggest concern was, can we get anything out of him? And to be able to register a sack in the first week and just kind of look like he has some juice still. If we're able to use him in long and late downs and have him affect the passer, I think having him in your pocket as, a pass rush specialist, I think it could pay dividends this season, and we'll see how it all shakes out. We'll see if, it's just one game. It's not a trend yet or anything like that. But compared to what I watched from him all last season to what he looked like in week 1 this year, he looks like he's got the step, he's got the juice still. Greg Russo, boy, do I love Greg Russo. And we just saw the extension announced for Spencer Brown. Really hoping that the Greg Russo one comes maybe right after this game. I was hoping that we would see that. I was hoping that he would be the first extension handed out. But we get Spencer Brown. I'm cool with that. think he showed tremendous development, but if we can keep a healthy Groot on the field, he is shown all kinds of talent. Was always a great run defender, continues doing that, but week 1 of the season comes away with 3 sacks, 6 tackles, like just a great game from Russo. And I've been kind of wondering with this team since we brought in Von Miller to be kind of that pass rush closer, the game wrecker when you need it. He goes out with injury and you're kind of looking at who's going to be that next guy, and it didn't really exist. And maybe Groot can develop there. And we've seen him kind of like working through foot injuries and all that. Through 1 week of the season, I feel pretty good saying that Greg Russo maybe could be that dude. And if he has the season that I think he's going to have, he is going to be extremely expensive to extend at the end of the season. I would love for them to bet on him right now and get that deal done. I think that we have recent memory of doing, extensions with Knox and Bass that may not have worked out exactly as we wanted, but I don't know. I think Groot's an absolute stud, and I just want to get that done. The linebackers, this one's kind of hard for me. They've both made some plays. Terrell Bernard, 10 total tackles, leading the team. A lot of those were coming a little bit further down the field than I'd like. But also looking at kind of all things considered, it looks like we give up, a lot of yards on the ground when you mix in Kyler Murray and Connor and Benson to an extent, like 130 yards, something like that. And I know this is never something you can do. All plays matter, blah, blah, blah. But James Conner had 1 carry that went for 20 yards. Outside of that, he had 15 carries for 30 yards. And that's a running back that the Cardinals like to lean on. You held him to 2 yards a carry. Benson, a highly touted rookie, 3 carries for 13 yards. So run defense has been something that we've kind of struggled with as a team. They have this propensity to give up big carries that kind of skew the stats. So I guess even more so now than ever, you can't just take that one run off the board because they happen kind of frequently. But when you kind of look at it all together and consider the fact that the whole first half, the Cardinals really had the room to operate with killing the clock, running the ball, whatever, and they just didn't have success doing it. So a little bit more out of the run defense than I was expecting going in, and makes me excited for what this defensive linebackers this defense has going forward. And the secondary, again, we give up 28 points, so it feels worse than it actually was. We do have, a touchdown given up there on a kickoff return for a touchdown, right after the Bills take a 2-score lead, and here we go again, the Bills score that touchdown to take a 2-score lead, and there's whatever, I think there was like 8 minutes left in the game, and I was like, cool, we're kind of in maybe a cruise control territory here, just finish out the game, and immediately after, kickoff return for a touchdown. So frustrating. But when you look at it that way, 21 points for given up by the defense, considering a turnover that we have in our own red zone that was going to lead to points, well, theoretically lead to points, just giving them extra possessions that way. All things considered, Murray looked really good in the first half, and then, only ends up with 21 completions, 162 yards, 1 touchdown. Bills are able to sack him 4 times, which is impressive for how mobile he is. And I think this game just kind of requires some context when you're looking at the score. Again, thinking about how many new players that we have in bigger roles. You talk about Hamlin getting a start out there, Ingram coming in, Cam Lewis playing significant time. You talk about Casey Toohill's in the mix, Austin Johnson, just all kinds of new faces again. Oh yeah, your superstar linebacker has already been lost for most of the season before it even started in Matt Milano. And I think it is going to require some, getting on the same page, cleaning some things up. But all things considered, the way the game started versus how it ended, you gave up 270 total yards. You came away with the win. The one thing I will say for the people out there that aren't fans of McDermott, there was the situation at the end of the game where the Bills are up 3. The drive kind of stalls out. They're faced with a 4th and 3. They elect to kick a 39-yard field goal to go up 6. And, they get the field goal. They go up 6. For anybody out there that's not a huge fan of McDermott, this is the kind of situation where I kind of get it. What's the difference between you get that field goal, you go up 6 points. Well, now they need a touchdown and they can win the game with a walk-off touchdown versus, maybe you don't take the field goal, maybe you don't get any points and they only need 3 to take it to overtime. Well, I know really anything can happen in overtime, but I'm just thinking to like the Ravens game against the Chiefs where the would-be touchdown to Isaiah Likely, his toe was on the back boundary line. But, before that play is even decided by the refs, Harbaugh's running onto the field saying, we're going for 2. Like, they're going for the jugular. They're going for the win. And it's just kind of a situation where the Bills were moving the ball well. You have Josh Allen. If you're able to get a touchdown there or even just extend the drive to continue taking clock off, you've pretty much wrapped up that game if you go for it and convert the 4th down. And if you don't, maybe you have to take it to overtime. Maybe they get a field goal. And if they get a touchdown, you're still in the same spot. So, I don't know. I feel like some of the aggressiveness is, banking on the defense still and banking on special teams. And I appreciate him as an aggressive coach. I understand that his background is defense. I think that something that has come up and bit us in some of these really heartbreaking, traumatic losses is that he doesn't default to, when he wants to be aggressive, putting the ball in Josh Allen's hands. And you have one of the best players in the NFL. If I'm going to be aggressive to try to secure a win, it's going in Josh Allen's hands. Especially in the modern NFL where there's so many weird things that can happen, and like how the league is set up for offenses to be able to score points. And the perfect example of this for me was this real quick PTSD trauma response I had when, the game's kind of in the balance and Murray tosses one up to the front corner of the end zone, like 2-yard line. And that ball's almost caught. And honestly, probably pretty easily could have been flagged for pass interference. And it ends up falling to the ground, no harm, no foul. But that's the type of thing where no matter how much I believe in our defense, no matter how aggressive I want to be with the defense to win the game, a simple flag coming out there for pass interference, and all of a sudden the Cardinals have the ball on like the 2-yard line, first down. They got to move 2 yards and you've just lost the game. So, glad it worked out the way it did, but I also like to look at like the, we feel good. The Bills won 1-0. And then I think sometimes kind of in wins, it's harder to be critical of your team, right? But imagine the conversations that we're having today if flag is thrown for a pass interference there, the Cardinals got the ball on the 2-yard line, and the Bills lose to the Cardinals again in dramatic fashion because the defense couldn't get it done. That this week of Bills content and fan submissions and fans calling into radio shows would have been absolutely insufferable. And it's kind of the biggest concern I had coming away from this game is feeling like there hasn't been a philosophical shift at all for Sean McDermott. And maybe he'll be able to look at this film and have his growth mindset and be like, damn, we almost blew another one because we couldn't get that one last stop. Maybe this will be some sort of catalyst for change. I have a hard time believing that just because of how many examples we have of him not adjusting that philosophy. So, escape this one. It is what it is for now. Hopefully we win every game by 40 points and we never have to deal with it again. Just to wrap up with a couple special teams notes. Tyler Bass was perfect kicking today, which is cool. For all the struggles that he's had throughout, preseason training camp stuff we were hearing. He has 4 PATs today, 2 field goals. I mean, granted, the long field goal for the day was 39 yards. So, ones you'd expect him to make, but on a windy day in Buffalo where things were kind of weird, he's perfect on the day. That's all I can really ask for. Good start to the season. Did have the kick that went out of bounds to give the Cardinals the ball at the 40. That was, again, something that we'll forget about real quick with this win under our belt. But again, that game goes the other way, and we're talking a lot about Tyler Bass this week. So glad that ends up kind of being a moot point. And the last guy I want to touch on here is Codrington, and gets one chance at a kickoff return, and this was a guy I knew nothing about. Roster cut down day, the Bills cut Daquan Hardy. I was kind of devastated by that because I thought he had some poor decisions in there, but I was actually really excited about him as like developing cornerback depth. The Bills get him back to the practice squad, obviously, and make a trade for Codrington. And, he gets his first opportunity to return a kick for the Bills and takes it back 53 yards. So this is the type of thing where, again, it's one return. He also had one punt return for 7 yards. This is one of those areas where I'm forced to admit that the Bills brass is smarter than me, and they went out and got a guy who I really never heard of to come in, and he makes an impact with his first opportunity to touch the ball. So I think overall, a lot of room, like I said, for things to be cleaned up. A lot of positives from this game that we could kind of project out and be like, this is what it looks like with their first in-game reps together on offense. So it does feel like a game where there was a lot clicking and still, I know we said this so many times last year, still a lot of meat on the bone. If that's kind of the baseline of where we're starting with this team and they can continue trending in the right direction, I think it could be a really exciting team. I have a pretty quick turnaround here with Miami coming up. It's going to be a big game, division game early in the season. Saw Miami also win, escape against Jacksonville with a last-second field goal. So one of the teams is going to continue being undefeated, and sure hope it's the Bills. It's going to do it for today's show. I do just want to thank everybody for your support. Again, if you're not already doing it, like, share, subscribe, tell a friend. Make sure you're checking out the website. We're going to be doing a lot of quick hitter articles, quick thoughts on the game, quick little 1-2 paragraph things, easy to read. You can kind of target exactly what you want to hear us talking about. If I didn't say so already, tell a friend. It helps us out greatly and kind of keeps the show coming out every week. So make sure you're subscribed so you're not missing any episodes. The Bills are 1-0, and we will see you next week after the Dolphins game. As always, go Bills.